All right, gang. Welcome aboard once again. It's time for the Mac Forum Weekly Video Chat. This time it's the October 1st edition. I cannot believe that we are into October already. I hope that you find a lot of useful information this week. Got a few things on the agenda for you. Hopefully you'll find it helpful. Let's dive right into things and see what's going on this week. First of all, I want to point out something. One of our newer members, came across a situation where he was looking for the apps tab in iTunes so that he could rearrange the apps on his phone, rearrange the order that the apps are on various screens. And he discovered that the tab is not there anymore. And that's because Apple has taken application management, iOS application management, out of iTunes 12.7. Some of you are already aware of this. Some of you were not. So what I'm going to do in just a minute, one of my iOS tips this week will be to show you another way to deal with application management. It's not quite as easy or intuitive in some ways, but there is another way to rearrange your applications on your iOS device. It should work equally well for the iPhone and iPad, and it's actually very easy once you get the hang of it. It's just some people have preferred to do it via iTunes. We'll fill up the tips and tricks here in a minute with some additional iOS tips and a few tips for macOS High Sierra, which is now out. The official release is out. I'm still running the beta, not the Golden Master, but the one immediately previous to that, because there are some issues apparently with the new Apple file system, APFS, and Fusion drives. And there is a process where I could back my drive down to High Sierra or to HFS Plus rather, and do it that way. But I really don't want to do that right now. And in a little bit, I'll show you one of the reasons why I'm kind of hanging on, waiting to see how long it's going to take Apple to get information together and get application support for APFS under Fusion Drive. All right, let's go ahead and move right on into a few other things here. One of our members, this is a thread, this is an ongoing thread here about various issues with iOS 11. You can move things now, even though Apple has taken application management out of iOS, out of iTunes rather. You can still do that, but you can still drag and drop the various files from your iTunes media folder onto your iOS device in the sidebar. The problem with that is that your media folder, as you update various things on the device, which is the new way that Apple has of doing things, it's not going to have the most current one. But I do have the link there in case you want to use that procedure for some reason. And as Jake and Charlie correctly point out, this doesn't allow you to have the most current version. The most current version is always going to be on your phone. And you'll have to probably, at this point, the only way that I can see to make sure that the current version gets moved, that the most recent version of an app gets moved from your iOS device to your Mac, would be through the use of some third-party software. Because this procedure that I linked to will only take care of the things that are already in your library. That doesn't necessarily contain the most recent version anymore. All right, another little surprise for people. who have updated to High Sierra. The way the recovery partition behaves is a little bit different in High Sierra. The recovery partition as we knew it before no longer shows in High Sierra the way it used to in previous versions. What happens now is when you boot using Command R to get to the recovery partition, the machine boots into a recovery utilities and it mounts a disk image. It's roughly 2 GB, which includes all the necessary utilities that you typically would need to get the machine back up and running. This includes terminal, the password utility, disk utility, time machine, etc. And Charlie says that this seems to be a little bit faster, and it works the same way as the older recovery partition. So you got the same functionality, it just behaves in a slightly different way, and in some respects, maybe a little bit faster. This is one of the many things that we're having to get used to with this change to High Sierra. All right. Speaking of the iTunes, the new 12.7 and its removal of the applications, iOS applications tab, Kirk McLaren talks about, he has previously said that he didn't consider iTunes bloated. And in this particular article that I'm going to link to, he explains what he thinks is the cause of the slowdown that a lot of people had reported prior to iTunes 12. My big reason for advocating splitting up iTunes, okay, and I did not think that Apple would quite split it this way. I thought that what they would do is split the iOS management functions out of iTunes into a separate little sort of mini launcher type app that all it did was manage your iOS device, backups, copying data to and from the device, etc., etc., etc. It could still read the applications in your iOS, in your iTunes library, and so forth. But that's not what they opted to do. Kirk points out that he thinks the problem with iTunes is that now it is so tightly integrated with the iTunes Store functionality that even if you're looking through your library at stuff that you have ripped, at CDs, for example, that you have ripped, it's still kind of checking back and forth with the iTunes Store, okay? And he thinks that's where some of the performance issues that people have had are. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mention to you another little thing from my friend Kirk over at his Kirkville site. He talks about why he thinks removing application management from iTunes was a kind of a stupid idea. And he's right, he rarely refers to anything Apple does as stupid, even though he's been critical of them from time to time. He points out something that's been mentioned on our forum before, and that is, with this new setup of managing the applications on the device itself, it means that if you have multiple devices, then you're forced to download an update on each device. And as an example, he gives Pages, Numbers, and Keynote. Okay, the Pages update was just over 400 megabyte, is your Numbers 385, Keynote 607, a whopping 600 megabyte. Now that doesn't sound like a lot if you have unlimited bandwidth, but a total of 1.4 gigabyte if you're downloading it on your device and you're not connected to a Wi-Fi network. And that's just for one device. What do you do if you're the one that manages several iOS devices for your family? as you can see, if you've got, say, 2 iPhones, a couple of iPads, so that's 4 devices, you're now up over a total of 6 gigabyte just for, or you're right at 6 gigabyte rather, just for those 4 devices. And that's not counting any other data that you would have used downloading any other apps or any other app updates, as well as any other media that you might have consumed and download. So you're going to want to be more careful than ever about when you do these updates. My suggestion would be try to make sure that you do these kinds of things when you're on your Wi-Fi network at home, assuming you have a decent speed network at home. That's not true for everyone, and that's one of the complaints that we're seeing with this change to iTunes 12.7. So that's another indication here. I am hoping personally that as this evolves, first of all, let me say, I should have seen this change coming a couple of months ago, because for years, what happened was when you downloaded a program, most apps had the code for all the various versions in one package. And that's the way you downloaded it. But recently, more and more of the apps changed to a situation where when you downloaded the iPhone version, you got a slimmed down version of the iPhone version of the app. When you downloaded the iPad version, you got a slimmed down version that contained the code for the iPad. Now that's good in terms of download time, but it's bad if it means that you have different devices. And now, of course, we see that that's part of the reason, I think, that they made that change. You can now download something that is specific to the device that you're using, but it means having to do this multiple times unless either A, Apple changes this and releases an application that takes care of this, or B, some enterprising third-party developers come up with some situations that will control this. So we'll just have to wait and see. It's going to be an interesting time for a little while there. And then I want to also mention on the Kirkville website, Kirk mentions a book, part of the Take Control series, about upgrading to High Sierra. And there's another one on using High Sierra. I've looked at the one on using High Sierra. It's a very good book, but I wanted to mention, I'm going to link to the article, particularly about upgrading, because I want to mention a couple of things that I don't normally say about upgrading that I think apply more now than ever. First of all, a couple of the usual warnings. First of all, as most of you know, I normally, ever since Apple started releasing the updates for free, I normally jump on the updates first day. I didn't do that this time because of the fact that right now under High Sierra, support for APFS is a little iffy on Fusion drives. Okay, so, but I want to make sure that I mention a couple of things that are good indications of probably what would be a good procedure. First of all, before you ever do that upgrade, go ahead and make a backup of your system. Now, personally, I prefer a bootable backup, okay? But if you've got a time machine backup going and it's current, that's great. Go ahead and make that backup before you do it. If you are having, now a lot of times I will basically do just basically update the install rather than doing a clean install. I've done that for the last several OSs and not really had a problem. I've recommended that you only do that if you are dead certain sure that your system was stable. Now this time, because of the change in the underlying file system, I will be going to a doing basically a clean install. I'm going to end up doing a clean install just because it changes and because I've run a the last several updates going probably back as far as at least El Capitan without doing a clean install, and it's probably just time. So that's something else to keep in mind. If you have any questions about the best procedure for doing a High Sierra install, post them in the forum, and we will try to help you with that and get things going for you. Some of those questions are going to be a little specific to your unique situation, but as always, you're going to start with the whole process begins and ends with backing up your stuff. And if you're making a bootable backup, okay, that's the easiest way to back down to Sierra and HFS Plus. If you're making a bootable backup, you want to test that backup for bootability. Try to boot from it before you do the install of the new High Sierra format. And also keep your eyes open while you're running High Sierra doing the installation. It's pretty self-explanatory, but because of the changes, keep your eyes open. Now, we've been using, I'm going to show you something else here in a second. We've been using a version of APFS for a couple months now because it was actually introduced in iOS 10.2, I believe it was. It's in iOS 10 for a while. So why is there all this concern over HFS Plus? What's all the hoopla? Well, let me show you a little something here. This is just real quick. This folder that I'm about to show you, let me show you how big a speed difference that is. This is a 12 gigabyte folder, okay? Now, suppose that I want to take that folder, I'm going to select it, all right? I'm going to go here and I'm going to pick copy because I want to make a copy of it. And let's just, for the sake of argument, say that I want to put it inside this folder that says copy to here. Watch how quickly this happens. This is in real time, and I haven't edited the video at all. Watch how quickly this happens. All right? And there you go. All right? You're done. Okay? That's how quickly that happens. That did not occur. If that's not occurring that quickly for you under El Capitan or under Sierra, don't be surprised. It didn't for me either. I'll put the time comparisons. I mentioned them last week. I'll put those back in the show notes again. They're significantly faster. Just an example, this is an M2T file. It's a type of video file that I've been working with once in a while. This is a 14 gigabyte file, as you can see. Now, normally, when you move a 14 gigabyte file from one place to another, it's very, it can be very time consuming. Just for the sake of it, I'm going to put it on my media backup drive here, and I'm going to go ahead and authenticate it, and you're going to find out how quickly it copies, all right, to that new drive. Now, the external drive that you see is formatted in HFS Plus, the old format. And I'm just going to enter my password. You won't see the password, obviously. But here we go. Now watch. From the time I hit OK, watch how long it takes that copy indication to disappear. All right. And this is on a 14 gigabyte file. I've never had it happen that quickly under Sierra. And now you can see it's taking a little bit longer than the duplication did because it's moving to an external drive that's still using the old format. But as you can see, it's moving along pretty quickly. A lot of file operations are occurring much more quickly with the new file system than they did under HFS Plus. HFS Plus, the original release of HFS was almost 2 decades ago, if I remember correctly. So it was time to rewrite the operating system. There are just going to be a few curves and bumps along the way. But that duplication gives you an idea how quickly things happen. Duplicating this file, if I had just done a copy, hitting Command D in the Finder, is instantaneous. Copying that large number of files, as you can see, when I did that copy a minute ago with the files that say audio 1, and I copied them over to the test files, okay? When I copied that over earlier, that's a very large collection of files. It is, let's see, how many different files? It's quite a few. It's 12 gigabyte, but it's a combination of a large number of folders, a total of 84 items, some of them files, some of them folders, the total up to 12 gigs. So that's a little more closely similar to what people have experienced. You can see the difference copying from HPFS to copying to an HFS Plus drive. It's still got a couple minutes to go on that HFS Plus copy. I'm going to go ahead and stop it there for a minute because I really don't need, you can see the difference. That was long enough for you to be able to see the difference. Now, I do want to point out a couple of things to you in the form of some tips for High Sierra, which is the new OS, and also for iOS. A couple of tips for each one. First of all, in High Sierra, you still have access to Siri, just like you did in some earlier versions. But right now, you can notice that I'm talking, but Siri isn't doing anything. And that's because I set Siri up to only react when I type things in, okay? And I'll show you how I did that. But let me first show you. If I say, how do I say good morning in French, nothing happens. You notice Siri is not picking up anything. I can type in, how do I say good morning in French, and it will now start looking, assuming I can spell, and it'll now start looking and give me an answer, okay? As you can see, it gave me the answer when I typed it in. Now, if you're in a situation where you want to use Sierra, but you don't want to talk to it, maybe you're in a really noisy environment, or you're in a situation where you need to be quiet, like at work. All right, here's what you want to do. You've got Siri enabled, you've got those settings checked. Here's the next step that you need to take to be able to type to Siri. Okay, the first thing you're going to do is go to Accessibility, and you're going to go in that preference pane and click Siri, and click Enable Type to Siri. Okay, that's going to force you to type your inquiries into Siri as opposed to speaking them. Here's the downside to this. When you want to go back and start speaking to Siri, you've got to go in and uncheck this option. And now, if I say, now, how do I say good morning in French? Siri will listen to what I'm saying, and it brings up something. It apparently misunderstood what I said, but you can see it's now reacting to my voice. The problem with this is when you want to type by typing to Siri, you've got to enable this checkbox. When you want to disable that feature, you've got to go back into the accessibility pane and disable it. There is a way using Automator and a combination of a terminal command to automate this process. I picked it up in one of the tape control books on High Sierra. I'll give you some idea. I'll post that. It's kind of hard to talk through, and I didn't set up a demo of that, but I'll show you how that works. Now, as you can see, I want to show you a difference between Siri on the Mac and Siri on the iPhone. Siri on the Mac doesn't actually do the translation, okay? But when I go to, let me just get to the right thing here. There we go in the dock. As you can see, I've got my iPhone screen up. Watch what happens when I tell Siri on the iPhone to do the translation. Okay, ready? How do I say good morning in French?
Bonjour.
Okay. Now you see, that's a difference. That's one feature in which Siri on the iPhone is a step ahead of Siri on the Mac. Siri on the iPhone understands that I want it to translate. I could have translated it into Mandarin or a couple of other languages as well. That's one difference between the two versions of Siri. Hopefully, Siri on the Mac will catch up sometime soon. And I want to show you another, I mentioned this briefly last week. I want to show you something else about iOS 11 that's actually quite good. First of all, if I want to see any apps that are not compatible with iOS 11, I can find that out, okay? I'm going to go to General, and I'm going to go to About, okay? Let's see. Or did I pick the wrong one? Hang on a second. Let's just go at it this way. It's checking for updates, but that's not what I want to do. Here's one way to do it, and I forget the sequence. I'll post the other sequence again. I did it last week, and now I'm drawing a blank. But watch this. This DAF Assistant app that you see on screen is not iOS 11 compatible. Watch what happens when I try to run it under iOS 11. Okay, I get a warning. So if you see that, you will know immediately that that's an application that needs to be updated for it to work with iOS 11. Whether or not it does work or not is dependent upon whether the developer has issued an update. And another iPhone tip. Remember, I mentioned to you earlier that one of our members was looking for a way to rearrange apps that are on his screen and on the home screens and on the various screens. Let me show you a way to do that now that Apple is pushing everything toward managing iOS applications on the device. I've mentioned this before, but it's still applicable under iOS 11, and it should stick. Okay, first of all, let's just say, for example, I've got two applications here that go together that really should be in the same folder. So I'm going to touch one of them, and in a second it starts to wobble, and I can drag one on top of the other, and that puts them in a folder. I can now name the folder, and I'm going to give it a name, Fluency. That's a couple of apps that I have had on the phone in the past. Okay, and now when I say done, it's created the folder. When I tap the screen again, all right, now if I want to stop the screen from shaking, all I do is touch my home button, and it'll stop, and now you're back to normal mode. But let me show you one other thing you can do. Our member wanted to move icons around. So let's take a look at how you do that. Because I have this application, SoundHound, on my thing, and it's way back in the fourth screen on my phone. I use it often enough that I want it to be closer to the front. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tap that application because that's the one I want to move. Let it start to wiggle. If I touch the X, I'm going to delete it. But if I move it, okay, I can now put it in a folder on another screen, or I can just put it on another screen. Okay, either way. As you can see, I moved it around. If I want it out of that folder, all I have to do is tap, okay, and drag to get it out of the folder. That takes a little more practice. I've got to tap there, hold it for a second so it will basically go into save mode, get it out. There we go. And now I can drag it out. The folder disappears. And I get to move it to another screen if I want to. Okay? When I'm done moving things around, I can hit that, hit my home button again, and it will stop the phone from, it'll put me back in normal mode. So that's an example of how you can do application management on the iPhone until you find a third-party app that kind of does what you would like for it to do. And that's gonna, I had a few other things that I could have talked about today, but I'm still in the process of testing a couple of them a little bit, so we'll save them for another show. We'll have a lot more in the way of iOS updates, dealing with iOS 11, and maybe some more information about iTunes 12 in an upcoming show. I'm going to be, for the next couple of weeks, probably running a lot of tips on High Sierra and on iOS 11, just because that seems to be where the interest is right at the moment. And I hope that you've enjoyed these two quick little tips, and we'll do some more things with those in the future. I'm also going to be looking probably soon at some of the changes to Automator, because as I mentioned to you, to activate or deactivate that change in Siri, you can use Automator to take care of that as well. So that's one of the things that will be coming up on in the very near future. And until next week, that's going to just about do it for me, guys. And by the way, yes, I apologize once again. I won't complain anymore, because I've been complaining for a couple years now that Apple needed to change iTunes. I had no idea I was going to do this. I'm sorry. It's not my fault. I don't know why they listened to me this time when they never have before. But hey, hopefully they will take care of that issue and come up with a better alternative than what we have. I haven't normally been too terribly annoyed by stuff that Apple has done, but that one was a little disturbing, and I think it's because it's disturbing for particularly for inexperienced users. That's where it's more noticeable. But even those of us with some Mac experience are having a little adjustment, because it's a significant change from what we were doing in the past. Also, just want to real quickly mention that when you go through these changes with Sierra, oh, I know what I forgot. I just this moment realized what the other tip is that I wanted to show you. This is one for Sierra. If you are for Safari, rather, if you are running the version of Sierra that comes of Safari that comes with the newest OS with High Sierra. Okay, I'm going to get that window back up on the screen here. I'm going to open one of my windows, because I want to show you something that I actually really like. All right, one of the problems that many of us have had in the past with Safari and with websites is there were a lot of websites that had autoplay turned on. When you started a video, it would start autoplaying whether you wanted it to or not. Okay? Some of the Macworld videos, for example, were notorious for that. Okay? So the question became, how do you stop that? And most of us employed some type of video blocker or things of that nature. Well, here's one way you can do it in the new version of Sierra. All right? I'm on the YouTube site. And what I'm going to do now, as you can see, I've already brought up a page that has Mac Forums videos, just because I didn't want to deal with some of the other videos that might be on the front page and content that you know, really I'm not that interested in most of the time. So here goes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go here. I'm clicking in the address bar, and I want to choose settings for this site. Okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to be sure that I pick enable content blocker. Content blockers. Now, this is not extensions. This is not previous extensions. This is enabling a feature that's built into Safari. I've got other content blockers and everything turned off right now. But watch what happens. Now, in the past, when I've loaded a video, it would autoplay. All right? So let's just see what happens here. I'm going to load one of our old video chats here. And as you can see, it's not playing right now. Okay, this is the current one. But let's go back. Let's take a look, just so that you don't think I'm pulling a trick on you. I'm going to pull up an old episode of the show. All right, here we go. This is from, let's see, I want to pull up, let's try January 30th. All right, now watch. It is not playing right now. And it's not going to start until I click. And now you can see, if you watch the counter, now you can see it's started. Okay? Now, the one flaw that I have found in this blocker, well, there's two actually. If I were to let this video play out until the end, the next video, I'm going to go ahead and scroll it to the end here. The next video that starts would play automatically. Okay, so that's one change. That's one thing that I'm hoping gets fixed soon. And then the other thing I've noticed is some ads, unless you're running an ad blocker, some ads still play. But this has cut way, way down on the number of problems I have with video. In some windows, the next video plays automatically. In some videos, it doesn't. As you can see, this time, this one is coming up automatically. So that's one change, though. You can, using a tool that's built into Safari, by going here to and choosing settings for this site, you can change how that behaves. When you find a site that's auto-playing videos and you want to stop it, you just go to settings for that site, you bring up that little window, and you enable the content block. And that will stop most video from playing until you tell it to. And as I say, the one flaw is that sometimes if you're finished with a video in a window and you don't close that tab, then the next video will play automatically. But that's not a vast improvement over what was being done previously. And you can also, just to show you, another thing that you can do with this, I'm going to open that tab again. I put it in a new tab. And now I'm going to start the video playing. And now I've still got that indication like we had before about which tab is playing video. I'm going to scroll it forward a little bit. And on most websites, I get a little indication right here. I can click and it will show me that that's the tab that's playing. I'll watch what happens as I think if I'm moving. Now you can see I'm still at the settings, but it gets me to a point much quicker where I like the way that management of tabs and these auto-playing video is happening in Safari. It's getting better. Still a couple of loose ends there to be wrapped up, but it is getting a whole lot better. And that's going to do it for me this week, guys. As I promised, had a few iOS tips, a few Mac OS High Sierra tips, and I'll have a few more of those next week. Probably a lot of other Apple-related news. I'll let you know anything new that I find out during the week. Any weird and bizarre tricks that I discover, I'll pass them on to you. But until next week, this has been your host, Sylvester Rock, aka Sly Dude on the forum. I've enjoyed being with you this week, and I hope that you will join me next week on the Mac Forum video chat.